Your valve springs and push rods could be costing you power and reliability, and you wouldn't even know it. Find out why this time on Engine Masters. This episode could answer questions that you didn't even know that you had. Here's the situation. In a pushrod engine, can push rods and valve springs affect power even in a situation where you don't have a valve float problem? That's what we're gonna find out. Here's the thing. Let's just look at the valve springs. You know, if you put a really heavy, beefy race-type valve spring in an engine, perhaps you've put a breaker bar in the front and you've turned it over and you're like, man, this takes a lot of power to rotate this engine. Does that mean that it kills power if you're running the engine with a stiffer spring? It must, because it takes, more work to turn it over. Second thing, you know that when you're setting up your valve train, you might have a push rod in there and a spring, and you're measuring lift. You know that valve spring flexes right there on the engine stand while you're testing it. But does that happen while the engine is running? And if so, how much power does it lose and what can you do about it? Those are the things we're gonna explore here, all with the help of the guys from Comp Cams. Let me start out by digging a little deeper into the tech of how this all works. Now, the valve spring is what we're really gonna be focusing on here in terms of how much pressure that puts in the system. Now, the other thing we're gonna be looking at is flex in the push rod right here. Note that I've intentionally done my artwork here so that the push rod is not directly in line with the lifter. You can see it's off like this to an angle a bit because that's how it is in a lot of engines, including this big block Ford. And the thing is, when that lifter is moving up and the rocker arm's over here and it's pushing at an angle, that rod can bend. And when it does, it's gonna reduce the lift at the valve because it's gonna take up that motion in here. The other thing that it can do is affect valve duration because as that thing bends, it's not imparting lift at the valve. Therefore, the lift at the valve is happening later and closing sooner, potentially, and we're gonna look at that in this also. Now that we've got all that covered, let's talk about valve springs and sort of how they're measured and how the pressures on them can be determined if they're light or if they're heavy. Let's imagine that this right here was the surface on the cylinder head where that valve spring is seated, right there. And then, I guess I'll draw a valve so that you get the picture of what I'm talking about. And then our spring is here. And then you've got a retainer up here, the thing that has like the little keepers in it and locks and things like that. So what we call installed height is the distance from right here, where the bottom of the spring is, to just to the underside of that retainer. That distance right there is installed height. And the thing is, when you get a spring straight out of the box, it can be really tall like this one right here. But when you install it, it's already been compressed a little bit, even when the valve isn't open. And typically you would see this at like, 200 to 100 on a big block. The big block Ford is unusual. It actually has an installed height of 1.880 inches. So we know that's our installed height, and we can measure with a special tool what the pressure is on the spring at that installed height. The initial set of springs that we're going to run has 210 pounds. Now that's often called valve spring seat pressure. The thing is, it's not pressure, it's actually load. You'll get engineering strokes that'll tell you that's not pressure because pressure includes a unit of area, like pounds per square inch. It's actually load, and it is. It's 210 pounds, not PSI. Now the next thing that we're going to look at is, let's say we've got that same spring, but this time, this valve is open down here like this. So therefore, the spring has been compressed. And once again, right here, you've got the underside of the retainer, and right here, you've got where it's sitting on the cylinder head. You can see that it's been squished. Now, let's just say that it's been squished so much that the valve is at its peak lift, or what we call on the nose. that would be the maximum load that that spring is going to see is when the valve is all the way open. In the case of the first set of springs we're gonna test on this thing, it has 550 pounds. Now let's talk about what we're going to go to. Here's real-world examples of the parts that we're going to be using. This is the spring that's in the engine right now, and it runs perfectly. It doesn't float the valves or anything, and we're gonna install this. You can see that this spring is much taller. We're gonna have to squish it in here into that installed height of 1,880, and when we do, I can tell you that that seat load is no longer 210 pounds, it is 350. And when we've got the valve all the way open, the load is now 800 pounds. That is an increase of 45%. Now that's pressure that we don't actually need for this engine to operate properly, but it does answer the question, does adding that much spring pressure and that much drama in rolling the engine around actually affect power? That's what we're gonna get into. But that's not the only thing that we're gonna test. We're also going to look at that push rod flex that I described, how this thing can become a spring and get all bendy. And to do that, we're gonna run 2 different push rods with each of our different springs. I've got one push rod that is an 80 thousandths of an inch wall thickness. See, the push rod's basically a tube. It's hollow, you can see through it. And so the metal is 80 thousandths of an inch thick. The stiffer push rod that I've got is 135 thousandths, so this should have greater resistance to bending. It's also way heavier, but does that matter? These are all the things that we're gonna find out. This is gonna actually be super interesting. It's not something that you see tested very much, if at all. Steve Brule thought of this, and I think it's genius, and I can't wait to learn. We're gonna learn with this engine right here. This is a 514 cubic inch big block Ford. The key that you need to know here is that it does have a solid roller camshaft. Everything that we're testing here really should be reserved for solid rollers as far as the heavy spring pressures, because if you have a flat tappet cam, running way too much pressure like this can wipe out that surface from the lifter to the camshaft. And if you've got a hydraulic camshaft, too much pressure might cause issues with the little plunger and piston and valve that are inside the lifter. So this is solid roller territory, as we love on Engine Masters. All right, I'm gonna go talk to the Steves, and then we'll fire this thing up and find answers to all these crazy questions. All right, this is gonna be an interesting test that came straight from the mind of Brule.
Ooh, that sounds interesting already.
Yeah, the whole valve spring thing. So our initial test with our 514 Ford is going to be with our light spring, which is 210 pounds on the seat and 550 open. And we've also got the thinner wall push rods in it, right?
85 wall.
So it is 85 wall, which would be 0.085 inches wall thickness on the push rods.
Baseline of Steve-O.
Well, that's the other question. Will we see the thinner push rods start to flex and lose power with the heavy spring?
2 or 3 or 4 questions that can be answered.
It's gonna be great.
Yeah.
One test at a time.
All right, fire it up, Steve.
All right.
We just made our very first test in the hunt to find out if heavy valve springs actually kill power, and also if flimsy push rods kill power. Right now, we've got the lightest of the 2 valve springs that we're gonna run and the flimsiest of the 2 push rods, and here are our power numbers. 659.9 pound-feet of torque at 4,500 RPM, and the horsepower is 648.9 up at 6,000 RPM. There's not much left to talk about. That's just is what it is.
It is what it is, and it's good.
So the next thing we're gonna do is run into the dyno cell and rip it apart and put in stiffer push rods. Right now they're 085 wall, and we're gonna put in 135. Yep. Ready?
I think it'll surprise you.
I hope so.
So here's a couple examples of the push rods. This is the older push rod we took out. Here's the new push rod. Visually, you can see absolutely nothing. But I can tell you, just feeling these, I can tell that this thicker wall push rod is actually heavier, so I know it's more substantial. And what we would see if we dissected it would be a smaller ID, which tells us that the wall thickness of the material is the same. It's the same material, basically an identical push rod, just a thicker wall. So it's basically a sturdier piece of pipe. So we've got the 135 wall push rods installed. Let's go see what kind of power it makes.
Look at our stiff push rod torque number, 660 pound-feet, and the horsepower, 652.6. I sort of desperately hope that the stiff push rods actually made a difference.
Me too.
Look at the overlay. Stiff push rods are in black, and flimsy ones are in red.
So it did.
Wow. It really made a difference up here.
You know, when I was looking at some of the data before I walked in, it looks to be about 5 up in that area. I mean, I was a little doubtful initially.
Yeah?
With this amount of spring, if that would be that big of a difference. And I think the real proof in the pudding will be is when we put that 800-pound spring on it.
Sure.
Because if that thinner push rod or weaker push rod is flexing and deflecting and losing lift,
Or
it's going to
breaking.
become more exaggerated with that bigger spring.
Wow, this actually makes me happy.
I know,
It's
me
better
too.
everywhere.
Because I didn't know if we were actually going to see anything.
No, it's better everywhere.
So I'm really anticipating these results being more radical when we go to the really stiff spring and the flimsy push rod, which is what we're about to do. Or should I say it's what Troy's about to do, because this is going to be a lot of work grunting this bar against a big, heavy valve spring.
Yeah.
Yep, let's go. Here's our process for changing valve springs with the cylinder head on the engine. First, we pull all the spark plugs. Troy's gonna put compressed air in the cylinder, just shop pressure, 100 pounds or something, and that is gonna hold the valves up so they don't fall in. Next, you'll see Steve install the tool on the stud for the rocker arm. He'll thread that on there, and once that is done, he's gonna start to squeeze it with the lever, and then you'll see him hold that fork down on the valve spring retainer and tap it with a hammer. There's the tap. Here's me removing the locks. 1, 2. And now the spring comes out. The new one goes in. All being very careful not to knock the valve down into the cylinder. You'll see when Steve puts the valve spring in and puts that fork back on the retainer, as he's squeezing it, he has to be really careful to get the hole in the retainer right over the valve so that he's not pushing on the valve, knocking it in the cylinder, which will release all the air pressure, and the valve will drop down in the cylinder, and it ruins our entire day. Here's our power with the 800-pound heavy springs and the Super Spaghetti push rods. 658.5 pound-feet of torque and 643.7 horsepower, which seems lower
Seems
than
lower.
it was before.
Only because it is low.
Really?
Oh,
Show me it.
let's see.
Have a whole bunch of spring on it.
Oh, look at this. The red lines are the prior test that had the lighter springs and the heavier push rods. The black lines are what we just did with the beefy springs and the flimsy push rods. The thing you can't explain is this.
No, it's
What if the heavy spring is somehow
Controlling better?
controlling better down here and the push rod's not in distress yet?
Yeah.
And then the push rod starts to go away right here.
Oh.
And then makes more power up there.
What if the push rod's deflecting and not giving as much lift, raising low-end torque?
And duration if it is flexing.
Yeah.
That's a good one. That's way better than mine.
I am getting
That's
smarter
way
after all.
better than mine. You're right. Think of that. That was genius. What Dulcich is saying is that the push rod's bending, therefore reducing duration in the camshaft, and we know that reducing camshaft duration makes more low-end torque, and that's what's happening. That's genius, Dulcich. I love that when we come up with excuses that sound plausible.
No, you know, there's actually some merit to that. You know, the proof is going to be when we put the stiff push rod back in it, it should tilt the curve back the other way.
If that's in fact the problem.
Yeah.
But yeah, we lost a lot of power going this way. And to be clear, the reason we believe that we're losing power is because that push rod is flexing, giving up lift, giving up duration, and just making a mess of the whole thing.
Or is it because the spring is heavier and it's harder to turn?
Well, let's put in the heavier push rod.
Okay, yeah, we're not going to know really what we're knowing until we throw in the 135 wall push rods, and even then we might not know, but we can come up with excuses because it's what we do. No?
No.
Facts coming up on Engine Masters. Here we go. We just set this up for the final answer about whether valve spring tension has the potential to kill power. We've got our heavy-duty springs in this thing. We've also got our beefy push rods. I'm going to make Steve fire it up on the dyno, and we're going to have a look at the power. Here's our power, and actually, it looks like we're going to conclude the stuff that we wanted to see. The torque with the heavy spring and the heavy push rod is 659, and don't forget the 0.9 pound-feet of torque, and the horsepower is 651.6. Let's look at the overlay of this, and it's got to be compared to the lighter spring with the stiffer push rod, which is the best power curve we've seen so far.
Heavy push rod.
Uh-oh. They're exactly the same. Yeah. There's a little bit of a something up there, but for all intents and purposes, the light spring and the heavy push rod and the heavy spring and the heavy push rod make the same power, the conclusion being that at least in this test, adding 45% more valve spring pressure over the nose does not affect the power curve.
I agree.
My whole interest switched gears as soon as I saw what the better push rod did, even with the other spring. It was like, okay, I wanted to go into this looking at valve springs. And you said, well, let's throw some push rods in there too, and let's do that. The guys at Comp loved that idea, doing both. And like I say, halfway through, I just went, oh my God, this isn't about the valve spring at all. This is about the push rod.
Well, but still, clearly, the whole thing about, you know, the engine turns over harder with a wrench when it's got heavier springs on it doesn't translate into any kind of a loss.
No, it does not.
Yeah. But the push rod, you know what we have to see? Let's look at a comparison of either one of these tests with the heavy spring with the light push rod. Yeah, look at that. This is a comparison in red of the stiff spring and the light push rod, and black is the stiff spring with the good push rod. And look at that, massive difference.
Yeah, I would have never caught that, honestly, between us guys. That whole thing about the push rod deflection causing the camshaft to actually be smaller.
Appear smaller.
And change something at the bottom, I wasn't prepared for that at all.
Yeah, I didn't see that coming either.
It's so repeatable, I'm very confident, and that's what's going on.
Yeah, and the reason Steve's saying that this is repeatable down here where the flimsier push rod makes more torque is because we saw it with both sets of springs, and it goes back to Dulcich's observation that the flexing push rod reduces duration.
It does tell me that the other spring is adequate.
Oh, yeah.
The 550-pound spring is adequate for this camshaft because we made the same power, same torque. It was identical. It was the push rod that was really significant in helping it pick up.
Let's talk about that in particular. we didn't need to add the stiffer valve spring to this, and there are in fact downsides to that, because you might be sitting there going, I might as well stack the biggest spring that I can get on my solid roller camshaft. There's no downside. There is. You're gonna wear out parts more. It's still gonna flex the push rod, and it's still gonna have rocker arm difficulties, like it's more strain on the rocker arm could break.
Yeah.
And the axle on the roller lifter.
I was just going to say the lifters. It's a higher strain on the lifter. So
and the seats. You can pound out the seats if you have a lot of closing load.
The valve seats. So while there are downsides to having too stiff of a spring, the question is there a downside to having too stiff of a push rod?
I'm not seeing that here.
No, not here. But I think a lot of people have the question, well, the stiffer one is way heavier than the thin wall one. But does it matter over on that side of the rocker arm?
I think it's insignificant over on that side. I mean, that's kind of what we saw. This push rod is certainly heavier than the 85 wall or the 80 wall.
And I think that's all the notes that I've got. So our final conclusions are run the lightest spring you can that still controls your cam, but if you go too much on the spring, it's not gonna have an effect on power, and there's no downside to running the stiffest push rod you can. And we can also conclude that you really wanna have stiff rocker arms and rocker arm studs, or above and beyond that, shaft rockers.
Right. I like the shaft rockers. They're so much faster to adjust.
Yeah, there's a lot of betterness about shaft rockers.
Yeah, certainly is.
Yeah, what's a good test for shaft rockers? Could we actually get something with like 1,100 pounds over the nose and run it on a rocker stud versus a shaft rocker?
You know, when we talk about deflection, this has got a regular stud in it. If this had shaft rockers on it, would it pick up even a little more?
I'm not sure if we'd see that on this engine, but I think we could do it with something more hardcore.
Yeah, certainly.
And more hardcore is what I love. Anytime I can pull it off on Engine Masters. The thing you can't explain is this.
No, it's...
Oh, yeah, I can explain it if you want me to. Of course. Because the spring takes more power to turn the engine?
But the heavy spring's making more power right here.
I thought you said I was getting smarter.
Can you not snack in the middle of the tape?
Are you chewing?
Oh, God.
He just shoved that beef stick right there on his throat, too.
This is a super double throwdown useful episode. It is a massive volume of filter and cold air testing, this time on Engine Masters. We're gonna have so much information in this episode, and it applies to anybody using tubing to build a cold air kit or having remote filters. Meaning this applies to off-road guys who've got the snorkel, carbureted guys who are doing a remote filter or building a cold air kit, and especially for anybody who's got an EFI setup that has a front-mounted or side-mounted throttle body. Here's what we're going to do. First of all, we gotta find out which filter is big enough. We're gonna start with a dinky little filter and find out if that kills power or not. And that's the theme of the whole episode, is what is restrictive, what kills power. We're gonna move on to building all sorts of cold air kits using a bunch of bends to see if bends kill power. We're gonna try multiple pipe sizes. We're gonna try a super standard unit like this that just is a straight 90-degree right out of that front throttle body. We're also gonna test some off-road pre-filters. Do those choke down the filter and kill power? We don't know. Here's the engine that we're testing today. This is a straight out of the box Blueprint Engines LS 6.2. It makes roughly 500 pound-feet of torque and 550 horsepower. Good enough to check all this stuff out. So that's our program. I'm gonna sit down with Brule for a second, and you're gonna have to watch the whole thing here because there is a massive amount of testing. Remember when we did this on a carbureted motor? I think this is gonna be more interesting.
I had no idea there were that many filters that fit a throttle body.
Yep. Well, that, and I think one of the great things about the show is we've got some budget. Who spends $1,300 on air filters in order to test this stuff?
You spent how much?
$1,300 bucks.
I'm telling.
Yeah. No, it's like nobody else gets to test this stuff.
No, and that's part of the advantage that we actually have is being able to actually go get that stuff and actually be able to test it. I mean, I look through that stuff and I'm like, you've got stuff from tiny and elbows,
stuff you've never seen
this shape
before.
and that shape, but it's all pretty cool. It's going to be interesting.
That's why you're going to like it. Let's start just with no filter, no nothing, just open throttle body. Really, the worst part of the whole thing is we don't have brother Dulcich with us.
I know the other Steve is not here, and I look so forward to it.
So yeah, our normal guy, Steve Dulcich, is out on a break, so he'll be back, don't worry. For now, though, it's me and Brule. This is going to be pretty good.
Absolutely.
That's a pretty normal hopped up 6.2, 550 horsepower, basically 500 pound-feet of torque. It was $499.
Things are pretty amazing for pump gas, 370 inches. I mean, 550 horsepower. We used to fight hard for that.
Ready to start killing it?
I saw them and I'm like, no.
Well, here's the thing. I was talking to your chassis dyno guys. They see this all the time.
You know what I see is that parked right behind a radiator.
Right up against the radiator.
Yeah.
100%. That's why I wanted to do this. This is the very smallest filter I could find at summitracing.com that would fit the throttle body. So I want to cram this on here, and I think what we'll do is we'll just race through all of these and then look at the data later.
I agree.
Yeah.
Sure.
So this is a Spectre.
Okay.
All the rest of them are K&N, so when we get to this point, it's not a test of the actual filter material. It's just going to be size.
Sure.
Yeah. Ready?
Yeah.
Now we're going to go to small size. Now medium. Large. Extra large.
Rapid fire.
That was interesting and not in the way that I had hoped.
Yeah.
Honestly. Here's basically what happened. This is our very tiniest filter, even though it does have an open area in it that adds to the overall surface area. This one is 2 3/4 by nearly 6 inches, and this killed only 9 horsepower.
Yeah, surprising.
It was very surprising. And then this K&N, which is a little bit larger, just a little bit taller, did exactly the same thing. Once we got to this medium-sized filter, which is 6 inches by 5 3/8, it made exactly the same power as it did with no filter whatsoever. And because this was capable of flowing enough air, that means that when we added the larger and larger ones, it had no effect. They all made the same power.
My takeaway on this, that the ones that mount right to the throttle body, it's really more about packaging. I mean, it's going to be hard to say this is big enough, this is too small. My take is that you would put the biggest filter you can as far as reasonable packaging, no matter what.
But either way, you're putting it right up against the radiator of the car.
That was my point. I
It's
don't
the
like
worst.
the packaging of this stuff that goes right on the front, but sometimes you're stuck.
Yeah, so the bottom line is all of these are a bad idea because of underhood heat.
Yes.
But the takeaway I had from here is I'm actually shocked that these only killed 9 horsepower.
They're so tiny. I mean, God, you'd have to put at least this on it just because these look like you're
stupid.
a junior.
Yeah. Okay, there's another thing that I want to do on this before we start dealing with piping and things like that. And I want to talk through with you which filter should we use with an off-road pre-filter.
You know, personally, if I were given a choice, I would use the nylon sock simply because I'm not a fan of the oil.
Yeah.
Because it continues to collect and stick. At least with the nylon, if it gets, you know, more or less clogged, it's going to be falling off.
Yeah.
And so it's not going to get a whole lot worse than as bad as it gets. This just can continue to get worse with the oil. It'll turn it into a mud clot, I would think.
Yeah. So which filter do you want to test them on? The
I say we just go with the smallest filter we can and see if there is any restriction with that sock.
All right, we're going to test some off-road pre-filters. First was the nylon sock, now the foam, and I did saturate that thing with oil. Here's an overlay of the filter sock versus the filter foam. As you can see, they're identical, but here's the power numbers. The sock made 494.8 pound-feet and 546.7 horsepower, and then the foam made 496.2 pound-feet and 545.9 horsepower. What we saw is that the loss versus the filter itself, the biggest loss in torque was 4.3, and the biggest loss in horsepower was 3.4, so they don't matter.
No, not much.
So next, I want to start building a cold air kit. So I'm thinking as many 90s and curves and things as we can stack, since that's what it takes to get out the engine and out in front of your radiator. Okay. So I've got 3.5-inch pipe and a whole bunch of bends. So let's just make a nightmare and see what happens.
Sounds good.
Okay, next up, nightmare of cold air plumbing. So we put together a mess of 3 90-degree bends and one 120, and we're gonna run it with that medium filter, which proved itself on the throttle body to not really kill power.
I call it Mr. Snuffleupagus.
Do you?
Yeah,
That's
funny. We don't want too tight, that's good, actually.
Okay.
Wow, that's gotta do something.
Let's hope. If that doesn't kill power, then really what we've learned is nothing matters. All right, let's run it. Now we're doing some damage.
That left a mark.
That left a mark. 486.8 pound-feet of torque and 526 horsepower. Let's look at that overlay to see just how gruesome it is.
What do we compare to?
Medium filter directly on the throttle body.
Ba-boom.
Yikes! Okay, so the black lines are the Snuffleupagus, all of these bends, 390s and a 120. And then the red lines are the same filter here, but directly on the throttle body. So obviously that's hideous. What do we do to start to find out where the problem is?
We're kind of comfortable with the fact that the filter was big enough on the throttle body, so it's the piping causing the problem. Do you think it would do anything by increasing the size of the filter at this point? Or do we just start shortening the piping?
I think we should find out if a larger filter makes a difference.
I think we're obligated to do that, just to be sure.
Let's throw the largest one on there just to make a big change.
Out of the way.
Find out. Okay, we're just going to do a quick filter change, put a bigger one on here, and see if that's the difference. Kinda don't think so.
I don't think so.
I think it's all the bends, but we have to know.
Yeah.
All right, big filter.
Okay. Quick and simple.
Same bends, extra large filter. Okay, the filter didn't matter at all. That was exactly the same. We're gonna go pull off these first 2 bends and install the filter and find out what it does. Fewer bends, extra large filter. We're trying to narrow down where the actual restriction is that's killing power. Significant.
Yeah.
Flow is affected by air having to change directions.
Sure. Just like water, ask any plumber what a 90 does.
Let's look how much better it was minus a 90 and a 120.
Boom.
Huge.
That's a couple bends. I wonder how many times a filter gets blamed for that.
Probably. Yeah. So there's the 2 curves. The red lines obviously are the earlier test where we had more bends in it. Black line, the current configuration. Our new power numbers are 542.8 and 493.8. And really the difference starts all the way down at 3,700 RPM.
Yeah, making a difference
just
everywhere.
Gets worse and worse and worse. So the question is, where do you want to go from here? I mean, I think we know if we remove another bend, we're just going to see that power keep on creeping closer and closer to
I think we're so close to adequate right now. I think anything that we do either shorter or bigger is going to be an improvement. You know, one of the things that we were talking about earlier is I initially, just off the top of my head, thought this was maybe a 102 throttle body, and it's actually a 90. The blade is exactly 3.5 inches, which is the same size pipe we have. So we know that the pipe is an adequate size, in theory. I mean, it's the same size as the throttle blade.
Because every foot of it's a restriction.
Oh, no, I'm saying size-wise, just diameter.
Diameter-wise,
but as far as every bend is going to make a difference. So there, in theory, there should be enough diameter there, and we should be able to eliminate bends just to get to that size.
Or I've got 4-inch piping that we can do in this exact same configuration, so we can do A, B, 3.5 pipe to 4-inch pipe.
I actually like your idea better, just simply because now maybe we can overcome the flow loss of the bends with pipe size.
Yeah. So next step, exact same thing, 4-inch pipe.
I'm with you.
Okay, cool.
Okay, good.
All right, let's change pipe. Now we've changed from 3.5 to 4-inch pipe, everything else being equal. That looked like it was like really good. I think there's going to be a difference between 3 and 4, but let's find out. We're digging up data. We just ran that 4-inch pipe instead of the 3.5, and it sure looks like it made a difference. Oh, not as much as I thought. I'm fooled by these little dips right there.
Well, you know, when we ran the 3.5 without this, we were at 543 or something.
Yeah, it was
we weren't
pretty
that far
close.
out. We were close. So.
Yeah. Black line's 4-inch pipe, red line's 3.5-inch pipe. Not as much difference as I thought, but there is a difference. Our new peaks, 498 pound-feet of torque and 545 horsepower, which really is the same as no filter at all, or as the filter right on the throttle body.
In reality, it is. And look, you know, it's a great dyno. It's a great piece of equipment. It doesn't surprise me with the barrel drop and the heat and the humidity and all the things that happen throughout the day. We could see 2 or 3 numbers. I mean, that's not completely out of the question. But
it's the same, and imagine the benefit in a car of getting the filter out of the engine compartment.
That's my whole point.
Which is just going to be even more better.
Yeah, that's not the whole story. If you can match the power and get it out in the cool air.
Yeah.
I mean, in the dyno cell, we can put that filter up on the throttle body. It's there. You put the piping on. It's there. It makes the same power. But in a car, being able to do that is huge.
Yeah, here's the thing you might not understand about the dyno cell is that there is quite a wind going through there all the time, fresh air. So even tucking the filter down next to the header, it's getting a lot of airflow. It's not going to mimic what's going on in the car.
Yeah, it really isn't. I mean, header temperature and underhood temperature and all that stuff, radiator temperature, everything that you can do to get that filter out into some fresh air is critical.
Let's talk about the things we've learned just now about bends. I think we know that adding bends is worse. We know that increasing pipe size makes it better just because there's more area. And I say that we're right on the power point where it kind of might make a difference. Like if you had 600 horsepower, I would definitely go with the 4-inch. If you had 300 horsepower, just use the 3.5 or 3.
Yeah, and those are some pretty big swings. I mean, yeah, 3.5 is fine for 300 horsepower. In this kind of package with these power numbers, look, 500 is not uncommon anymore.
I know.
You know, so, you know, kind of what I'm starting to feel like is whatever you can package in there.
Make it big.
Make it as big as you can with the biggest filter you can and package it in the freshest air possible.
Yeah.
Then you don't have to worry about whether you made it or not.
The other thing we have going on here is nice, big, smooth, flowing bends. And the hot trend right now is to make tight bends that are all pie cut. Like they'll do 30 pie cuts in a row, all TIG welded and beautiful and stuff, but it's not that awesome.
It might look good, but I don't think that's really great for flow when you have a short turn like that. Yeah.
But packaging is a real thing in a car, which is why our next step is going to be a 90 right out of the throttle body, over to a straight, over to the filter. All right, I'm going to go get the parts. I I look at that as more good news.
I know.
It basically didn't kill power, and that's a super practical way to do things.
I'm surprised, and I think kind of what it shows us is it's not so much where the 90s are, it's the fact that there's 90s.
Yeah.
Being right in front of the throttle body doesn't really matter any more than it being down at the filter. That is encouraging because we see a lot of cars like this. Some of them stop right there, kind of next to the radiator against the core support. I've seen some of them that go through the fender well and they're right in front of a front tire. I'm not sure I'm too fond of that with water and
I always wonder about the rain.
Weird. Yeah, I mean, and if a guy never drives it, then I guess, you know, never drives it then. But this is actually pretty practical and pretty real world. I mean, if there's just this much room where you can get that tight 90, you can at least get the filter out from right behind the radiator. It might be beside it and seeing a little heat, but certainly not full flow of the radiator.
And you can add a sweeping 90 and bring it straight forward through the core support.
Yes.
And anything you lose in the 90, you're going to gain from even more cool air.
Yeah, sure.
I learned a lot in this episode. I do have some conclusions written down. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
This is the wrap up. We sort of hit all these points as we went through the episode, but I would say, first of all, we tested all those filters on the throttle body, but really, we think that's the worst position for them because of heat.
Certainly.
The other thing we found out is that if you're making about 550 horsepower, that 6-inch filter is enough.
When it's on the throttle body. You know, and the filter didn't matter with all the pipes.
Right, we saw no improvement. That was my next point, is that if you've got a whole bunch of pipe, a larger filter isn't going to make up the difference between the restriction and the pipe. Yeah. And we also learned that bends are absolutely bad, so keep them to a minimum, and if you have to have them, run a larger pipe size. We figured out that if you can package 4-inch pipe, do it. If you're at this power level.
Yeah. But package the biggest stuff you can is kind of my opinion, unless you just don't care and it's kind of an aesthetic thing and it's really just a driver.
Yeah.
But if power is your concern, it's hard to know where that line is. So just make it as big as you can, package as much in as you can to the freshest air you can.
Right. And, the other thing I took away, actually, is when we did hard 90 out of the throttle body, I was really happy that that was not a detriment.
Well, it showed me something, too. I mean, it really is more just the fact that it's a 90, not so much where it is, because there was only one 90 in that whole business there, and it really performed very well.
And, of course, the last thing we know is that dinnerware works every single time on what? Engine mask.
You fed me lies with poison lips. I bled from every sinking ship. But now I rise with sharpened grace. You'll see the venom in my face. You broke my wings, I grew my claws. Now hear the wrath behind my cause. I've got a venom heart, tearing your world apart. You built your throne on hollow truth. Now feel the fire of my youth. No more tears, no more regret. I'm the storm you won't forget. You played the game, you pulled the strings, but I'm the chaos fate now brings. I won't be silent, won't be tamed. You'll scream before you say my name. Before you say my name.
You have a naturally aspirated engine. Is E85 fuel worth it for you? What about oxygenated race gas? What about methanol? Well, they make carburetors for all of them. We're gonna find out which one is best for you. This is going to be a little bit of an educated retread of an old episode with a couple of updates that I'm really excited about. So in the past, we did a show where we compared race gasoline versus E85. This is going to be that plus two new players, one of which is oxygenated race gas, and the other one is methanol. Here's how we're gonna do it with three different carburetors, which are designed for each specific fuel. We're gonna start out on gasoline with the Holley XP carburetor, and this one will be run both with the Sunoco 116 octane gasoline and the Sunoco oxygenated 107 octane gasoline. Next up, we have another Holley XP. This one is made specifically for E85. And finally, the QFT carburetor, which is Quick Fuel Technologies, is all set up to run on methanol. Now, importantly, each one of these carburetors is rated at the same CFM. They're all 950s. They all have a 1 3/4 inch butterfly on all four, and they all have a 1.6 inch Venturi. They all have down leg boosters. We shouldn't see a difference across all these fuels just as a result of airflow or carburetor design. They are similar enough. So let's talk about what this engine is. This is a Westech Dyno Mule big block Chevrolet, as you expected. It's 496 cubic inches. It has about 12.8 to 1 compression. And the reason for that higher compression ratio and the reason why we're not testing 91 octane fuel, if you're running methanol, you're typically running higher compression ratios. It's sort of like a bracket racing or some kind of racing involved with methanol. And so 91 octane really isn't a player anyway, which is why we're running higher compression, higher octane fuels, and the methanol. To move on, the cylinder heads on this thing are an AFR 325cc as cast inlet runner. They do have CNC chambers in them. The camshaft is a comp cam solid roller with 272 at 50. Up top, we're running an Edelbrock 454R intake manifold. Here are the things that we're going to be looking at with each fuel. Of course, there's the power. There's also going to be the pros and cons. And finally, we're going to look at the fueling demands of each of these different fuels. And the very first one that we're going to run is the 116 octane Sunoco race gas. Okay, this is one I've never done before. I don't know if you have. I know you've run a ton of E85, a ton of methanol, but have you ever back-to-backed them before?
No, we've done here on the show.
We did E85 versus
gasoline.
race gas, yeah.
The methanol is what is tugging on my curiosity chain.
Yeah, me too. The other thing is, do you remember when we did gasoline versus E85? And basically, yeah. I was not sold. I was like, no, I see no purpose if there's no boost. So I now have had more time fooling with it, and I think I've got a little bit more of an open mind and understanding of it, and I think I might learn more about it in this test.
I'm looking forward to the methanol, you know. I want to see what, that's the thing we don't play around with. I've only done it one time, and it was on a 4-cylinder Honda, like years and years ago, so.
You know, the IndyCar drivers use it, the sprint car guys use it.
Drag race, bracket racers.
You don't see methanol at the drag strip much. You don't see it in any street applications.
No.
But who says you couldn't? I mean, it's...
I was going to say, when you're like, well, why couldn't you use it on the street? Because your gas mileage falls to 5.
But it costs 1/4 as much.
That's true.
You just need a bigger tank.
You got to fill up, and it's not available. So that brings up the other thing, though, which is you use twice as much alcohol as you do gasoline, which leads to the discussion of what is stoichiometric for each one of these fuels. I guess to have that conversation, we need to understand what is stoichiometric. Steve Dulcich.
No, I mean, it's just a theoretical number. It's a chemistry number. You've got so much fuel on the right hand. How much oxygen does it take to completely balance that equation, burn every bit of fuel, and whatever that number is as a percentage, it's your air-fuel ratio, stoichiometric air-fuel ratio, theoretical number. These are quotation marks, not parentheses. And That's a basis that gives you a comparison, you know.
And for gasoline, that stoichiometric number is 14.7 to 1 air-fuel ratio, but we never run an engine in the hot rodding, wide open throttle horsepower world at that number.
Not if you want to drive it tomorrow.
Right, because it'll blow up.
Yeah.
So as we start with gasoline, that sort of answers the questions that I want to address at the beginning of every fuel. Gasoline stoichiometric is 14.7 to 1. We typically see peak power between 12.2 and 13.0. Is that fair?
Yeah, between 12 and 13.
For a naturally aspirated engine?
That's fair. Really, I don't target numbers. I target power.
Right.
In a normally aspirated engine, I don't
You don't say
target
to yourself, it's got to be 12 and a half to 1.
No, what I do is I let the engine tell me what it wants. I just look for best power.
And you've already tuned up this engine completely, so we
I
can
did.
baseline it on gasoline and then move right on and find out what these other fuels do for us.
That's what we can do.
All right, let's see it.
All right.
Here's our first test on the Sunoco 116 octane race gasoline. So there's our baseline. First, we need to look at the baseline power that this thing made, so let's do that. 770.4 horsepower at 6,600 RPM, and the torque was 647.5 at 5,500 RPM. Yeah, not bad. I do think this downturn here is likely because the carburetor is too small, if you agree with that.
Yeah, I do. I mean, we've had a Dominator carburetor on this thing previously, and the curb looks a little better up here, and it makes another 20 horsepower. You know, it makes right at 800 with the Dominator on it when it's tuned up pretty good. And, so yeah, I think we're limiting the airflow a bit with this comparison,
But let's address that. But is there anything about running the smaller carburetor that will invalidate the fuel tests?
no, because we're looking at fuel, not airflow. And what we did do is to make sure that we were comparing apples to apples. We were really cautious in making sure the carburetors were configured the same. So we didn't run methanol with a little carburetor and gasoline with a big carburetor, any of that stuff. You know, we're comparing the same CFM rated carburetors.
Even playing field.
Yes.
Okay.
All right, now let's talk pros and cons of the racing gasoline. I'm gonna say con, it's expensive.
That's where I was headed with
Yes.
the first one was expense.
Exactly. Any other cons to it?
I don't know, that's pretty good. That's about the only problem with it.
The pros are going to be availability. You can get it pretty much at any drag strip.
Yeah, consistency is one that I like with race gas.
Consistency.
Smells good?
Ooh, that's a good one. It does.
Yeah.
Good pull, Dulcich.
Oh, yeah.
I'm gonna say another one is that it is easier if you need help tuning it to find somebody who knows how to deal with gasoline.
Agreed.
You can buy carburetors off the shelf that are dialed. You can get help with it.
And-
so common knowledge, tribal knowledge.
One more.
What?
When it's on fire, you can see it.
That is a legitimate one.
Yeah.
You keep coming up with the good ones.
I mean, the downside is it's not 91 octane that you can just buy literally anywhere, but with the almost 13 to 1 compression we've got in this thing, you can't run that anyway.
No, and a lot of these style engines are way above that. They're at 14.5 to 15 to 1 compression, so it takes some pretty serious octane.
Yeah. Anything else?
It's got a high power content per volume.
Power density? Yeah, that's right.
Probably the
BTUs,
highest
yeah.
of anything that we're going to use.
That's
Yes.
right. Every other fuel we're going to
And you know how we know
test.
that? Because we're using the least pounds of it while we're running it.
We'll start comparing that once we look at the next fuel. Speaking of which, I guess next up, we're going to run the Sunoco oxygenated gasoline, right?
Yep, got to go jet it though. Sunoco says that there's like potentially a 15% increase in fuel required.
Okay.
First time I've seen that printed that high.
Does that
So
mean
I'm
it has
hoping-
15% oxygen in it?
I'm
Well, the
not
math
quite
doesn't
sure.
work exactly
no,
that
it doesn't
way.
work
No.
that way, but I've never seen that sort of increase or requirement. I've seen, put 4 jets in it, you see 2% in power. So I'm hoping for a pretty good significant a pretty significant increase in horsepower.
So the reason that you would need to put larger jets in it for an oxygenated fuel is that because the oxygen is in the fuel, you then need to add more gas to make up for that, so your air-fuel ratio ends up the same.
The whole content of the volume and the ratio, correct, on both.
So if you just pour it in the tank, it goes lean.
Instantly.
Right. But if you richen it up, it makes more power. So what are you going to do?
I think I'm going to take a swing somewhere. I'm going to head to the rich side, or what I perceive to be the rich side, the first swing, because I'd rather be rich than lean, and just be a little cautious. I'm going to throw about 8 jets at it, and if it's rich, then we'll back it up some. I know that's a big swing, but I took 4 out of it a little earlier, and I don't think it's going to make up that difference. So I'm going to head, like I say, to about 8 jet changes or 8 sizes. And then we'll see where that leaves us. And we may have to do it twice, and that's okay. We just get to have more fun.
Interesting.
Okay.
So Brule's going to go jet this thing up 8 sizes. Troy is going to pour the oxygenated Sunoco fuel in the tank.
This is going to be good.
We're going to sit here and surf Instagram.
Yeah.
Watch.
As always.
Yes.
Well, I was about a putz when it came to thinking how much jet it was going to take.
Oh, man, that's nuts. So let's first look at the power, and then we'll talk about that. Our new peaks with the oxygenated fuel, 781.3 horsepower and 668.4 pound-feet. Let's overlay that with the regular gasoline and just see. So look at that. The black lines are the oxygenated fuel, and red is regular old race 116 gasoline. And once again, virtual train tracks. It tightens up a little bit up at the top.
Oxygenated fuel is really kind of cool. I mean, if you have a race car with a fuel cell or something, a couple gallons, take a few minutes to dump it, but I mean, that's just free power. That's free everywhere.
But you had to jet the thing. You told me the primary went from a 78 to a 90, the secondary an 80 to a 98, 18 sizes, and you put in smaller air bleeds.
Yeah, so if you've got a Dominator that's already got 96s in it, you might be running out of real estate.
Which raises the point, would you start to run like an E85 carburetor at that point if you were just dedicated to that oxygenated fuel?
You know, there's jets available. I mean, there's a lot of different things about an E85 carburetor, but when you get to this point of fuel consumption, when you're increasing the volume that much, that's a possibility. There's also other things I could do to this carburetor to increase fuel flow a whole bunch. It has provisions behind the power valve, as we've done before. You know, blow-through carburetors and increasing it. We can either increase the size of the restrictor or remove it completely. We can get more gas in this thing, there's no doubt about it. So that would be something you could do with a big carb too. One thing I'd like to look at, because it was something out of the corner of my eye over here I was looking at, was the plenum temp. It seemed to be just noticeably lower, and I'm not sure, but I wanted to take a look at that.
So we have a sensor and a carb spacer right underneath the carburetor that's giving us the manifold plenum temperatures. This is the first time we're going to look at that data, and Steve wants to see if we had colder temperatures with the oxygenated fuel than we did with the regular fuel. The octane of this oxygenated fuel is 107, so it's actually less than the 116 that we ran before.
It got a little cooler.
60 degrees, dropping down to, I don't know, 55 with the regular gas. So 60 degrees, dropping to 55 with the regular gasoline, and all the way down here at 42.5, dropping to 40 or 38.9.
That's a big difference.
Yeah, so why would it be so much cooler with the oxygenated fuel?
I know that one of the additives that they use frequently in oxygenated fuel is methanol.
Okay.
So now we're starting to see a cooler air inlet charge because of the methanol and the additives. And that's something that I've seen before with the oxygenated fuel, but never to this extreme.
How about the sheer volume of it? We're moving a lot more volume of fuel across that sensor.
Yeah, that's true too.
Let's look at the pounds per hour of fuel flow with the regular gasoline versus the oxygenated, just to see, you know, in raw terms of fuel volume, what you did with that jet change. This graph is fuel flow in pounds per hour, and the black line is the oxygenated fuel, and the red is not oxygenated, so you can see how much more fuel we're using of the oxygenated stuff, which correlates with the jetting. But let's talk about pros and cons, and the one that is the biggest question for me is, will this pass tech as gasoline for a racing sanctioning body?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
It does not meet a dielectric constant of 0.
Right.
And with their little fuel tester, you're out of
You're
there.
gone.
But
So
there are
that's
some
a biggie.
sanctioning bodies that just say racing gas, and as long as it's a gasoline, they're not actually testing it. That is a racing gas, technically. I mean, there are some boat sanctioning bodies I know that will let you run that in a gasoline class, but technically it has oxygen. It shouldn't pass tech.
Depending on the rules for the class that you're running in. So that's a potential one. How about availability? You don't just walk up to your typical racetrack and buy this, do you?
Probably not. It's not going to be like walking up and buying 110 or 116. Part of that's because sanctioning bodies don't generally allow oxygenated fuel.
Yep.
So the availability is going to be an issue, no
But
doubt.
you can buy it at West Tech Performance Group in Miraloma, California. And then there's the jetting problem.
Yeah.
You could not get there from here depending on what your carburetor is.
It'd take some calibration work. I mean, it's going to take somebody that kind of knows what they're doing. It's not simply just pour it in the tank and go.
How about the cost comparison?
I think it's maybe $4 a gallon difference is all. It's not horrid.
That's a lot of difference. $4 a gallon.
When you're looking at race gas that costs $16 or $18 a gallon, and you're going to an event for a weekend, you're going to use a total of 10 gallons, $160 or $80. What's the difference whether it's 180 or 190?
I guess not, especially when the difference is the power.
Yeah.
Which gets to the pros. The power is the massive pro.
Which is always worth that other $4 a gallon.
Yeah. Wow. Anything else on the Sunoco oxygenated fuel?
No, I just want to go play some more. That's good stuff.
Okay, now we're going to make a change to the carburetor so that we can run E85 next. And bye-bye. With the carburetor off, you can see our air temperature sensor here. And I had made the comment earlier that I thought it might be washing. That's actually not the case. The probe does not protrude into the plenum, but it's still reading the air temperature in there. You got that carburetor, Steve?
I present you with the E85 carburetor.
You can tell by the way it says E85 all over it.
Man, you know all my tricks.
What we just did there is take all of the oxygenated gasoline out of the lines so that we can fire it up on the E85, not have it sour our test at all with some contamination. E85. That E85 is not race E85. It's straight out of the pump down the street, right?
Drive to the gas station and pump it in the can.
Perfect. Let's look at the power. Our peak numbers with the E85 are 776.7 horsepower at 6,600, which is actually just a little bit better than 116 octane gasoline. And the torque also way better at 671.2. That is crazy how much better the torque is.
It's kind of what we've typically seen before, the cooling effect of the E85. You know, it seems to add a lot of torque, not quite so much horsepower when the engine speed increases, and there's not as much time to cool the combustion chamber and make it that more efficient, low-pressure area.
We've had discussions in the past about how the E85 makes more torque in the mid-range but not horsepower, because our belief was you have to use more E85 versus gasoline, so the E85 droplets themselves are taking up the room in the carburetor and preventing, well, and the intake manifold and preventing as much airflow. Are you still down with that concept?
I think the E85 still takes up more space because it's 30% more fuel than gasoline, or 28%, whichever it is. But I still think that I think that's dependent upon intake manifold too, and carburetor, and how big they are in reference to the engine. If there's enough capacity, I don't think it's as critical as if you're kind of taxing those components.
So it's therefore worse with what we're doing here with the 950 carb instead of a Dominator on that motor?
Yeah, it probably is, because it doesn't have enough carburetor really for this engine. It could use more. We've seen time and time again where some of the fuels with better ability to cool the inlet charge. At lower speeds, it has more time to do that in the combustion chamber. So the combustion chamber becomes more efficient at a lower pressure area. As the engine speed increases, there's just less and less time for that to take place. So I think that's my take on why there's always more torque down here than there is up at the top.
Well, it might be a combination of the two. Because like you said, you are displacing some of the air with a greater amount of fuel.
So it's both those reasons.
Yeah.
And it brings us back to the episode that we did where we were testing why does an engine make more power with lower coolant temperature? And we determined that it was because a cooler chamber has less pressure in it. Higher heat is more pressure, lower heat is less pressure, and therefore it's easier for it to ingest fuel. It's not fighting the air and fuel coming in. So it's the same thing with this. It cools the chamber, so therefore it can move more air in.
Yeah. It's lower pressure area can take more air in, and we verified that with CFM. That was my favorite episode, by the way.
That was pretty interesting. So let's go ahead and compare this graphically with the 116 race gas, our A test. We've been talking the whole time about how the E85 made way more torque. You're about to get that visually. Right there. Look at that.
Wow.
Exactly what we were describing. Makes way more power until we get to the very high end.
Yeah, there's a couple more at the top, but not a whole lot, and that is pretty much what we've seen before.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
That's worth it.
That'll move your car down the track faster.
Yes, it will. Let's have a look at that manifold air temperature to see if we can find out just how much cooler the E85 is. That's a huge difference. Our black lines here are going to be with the initial A test with the Sunoco 116 octane non-oxygenated fuel, and then the E85 is way down here. So the E85 is roughly 44 degrees, and we went from 60 degrees down to about 57 with the other gasoline, and that makes power.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it also it makes it more knock resistant or resistance to detonation. So it's not just the octane, it's also the temperature.
Yeah.
And by the way, this is what makes E85 absolute brilliance for boosted applications.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is that ability to pull heat out of the air.
Yeah.
It's awesome. Just for curiosity, can you give us the oxygenated fuel? So that would be B test final. Yeah. Whoa, it's almost as cold as the E85.
Yeah.
Wow.
Pretty good, yeah.
The oxygenated fuel just keeps looking better and better.
Yeah, and that may be part of the reason that it makes more power too.
Right. Okay, cool. So E85 is pretty good. But let's go over the pros and cons, because I think it has some distinct cons.
I think so. I can start.
Go.
Smells bad.
Stinks. I would argue availability is a problem, especially out here in California. You can't buy E85. It's rare to find it at the pump. Other cons? Corrosive.
Oh, yeah, biggie.
It is big time corrosive, especially with a carburetor. It's the worst. So also, if you're going to convert to 85, you need a brand new carburetor. You can't get there from here if you start with a gasoline carburetor and try and make it flow enough for E85.
Maybe a carburetor modifier can. Obviously, you can get there because they have carburetors, but
it's not practical.
Regular guys cannot. No, you just need to buy another carburetor.
Is it enough fuel demand? What is it, 30% more fuel?
28 or 30, right in that area.
So that's probably not a scenario where you'd need a different fuel pump. Probably if you have enough headroom on your pump, you might get away with that if you're converting from gasoline to
Depends on what you're starting with. I mean,
but
if you're right
on
at the limit.
And if the diaphragm in your mechanical pump can actually not just disintegrate in the E85. So that's a bunch of downsides to it. But the advantages are it's way cheaper than race gas and has the octane to support something like this. And if you live in the area where you can get it at a pump, that's a big deal too. All right, there's pros and cons of E85. I guess we need to move on to methanol. Now, when we do that, what is the difference between the stoich of E85 and stoichiometric for methanol?
6.6 and 9 to 1 for the E85.
Which means, speaking in broad terms, methanol wants about twice as much volume of fuel as gasoline.
It's 100% more instead of 30% more as
Right.
far as volume.
And it wants another 30% on top of E85.
More than that.
More than that?
Yeah.
Is
Well,
it?
I mean, if you're starting with, 100 pounds and you turn it to 130 pounds, if it's 30% more, 100% more isn't another 30%, is it? 30% of 130?
I always screw up the math when we guess.
Why don't we just say twice as much?
Well, but how much more do you need? How much more fuel do you need to go from gasoline to E85?
30%.
Okay, and from going from gasoline to methanol, you need 100% more.
You double it.
Yeah, which is why you can't take an E85 carburetor and turn it into a methanol carburetor.
Have you looked at methanol carburetor jets?
Yeah, they're like,
It's a whole nother jet configuration, a whole nother thread count, a whole nother metering block. The orifices throughout the carburetor are massive, so it's built to move a lot more fuel.
Well, let's find out if it's worth it. So we're going to go change the carburetor to a QFT methanol carb and then pour methanol in the tank and fire it up and see if that methanol is worth way more power. Is it worth the aggravation? That's what we're here to find out.
Look at this packaging.
It's all nice and blue. I like methanol power.
Oh yeah, methanol's the best, really, if it's right for your application, though.
You've always told me that it makes more torque than horsepower, but let's have a look. Here's our power numbers on the methanol. Way more torque. We got 670 pound-feet. If you compare that to regular gasoline at 647, that's a big change. And our horsepower was 769.6, up at 6,500 RPM, which is almost the same. We saw 770.4 on the gasoline. So while that looks fantastic, it's basically the same as the oxygenated gasoline.
Yeah.
So let's pull up and have a look at it versus 116 octane race gas. Here's our comparison of the methanol in black versus the regular 116 octane Sunoco in red. Wow, that's a big difference. And it does back up what you've always told me, which is that it makes more torque than horsepower.
Yeah, and again, I think it's that speed thing, you know, on the ability to cool the combustion chamber. I keep going back to that, but that's the only great explanation I have, you know, for that kind of phenomenon, is the way it occurs with every fuel like that.
That and the airflow argument.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
That's beef, though. That's a lot.
It is.
That makes you accelerate a lot faster.
Yeah, it does. But I really want to see it compared with the oxygenated gasoline also, because that was mind-blowingly good. There's our numbers for the oxygenated Sunoco gasoline. We're going to do it versus the methanol. I just wanted to see these two. So the black lines are the oxygenated fuel and red is methanol.
Depends. You want the torque or you want the horsepower, Freiburger?
I guess so.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of interesting the way the curve crosses here. I think the oxygen content of the Sunoco oxygenated fuel has to be higher, actually, than the methanol.
That would be your deduction.
Yeah.
In fact, high enough to overcome that cooling factor as well. Well, but it also doesn't have the airflow problem because it's not using as much fuel as the methanol is.
Yeah, that's a good point, because this is taking up twice as much air with the methanol, I mean, or twice as much space in the air as gasoline, and the oxygenated is only another 15%.
And we're exacerbating that airflow problem with this small 950 carb.
Yeah, you know, we had a couple other carburetor choices. That'd be interesting too. But yeah, we've got all 950s, all the same size.
I wish I could put methanol in your duster and go back to the track.
Well, actually, you know what? You say that. That's a low compression engine. Why is it that people always say methanol, oh, not worth it unless you crank up the compression? I think it's more that you can crank up the compression.
Absolutely, you can.
But you know, there's other things about them. Methanol burns more slowly than gasoline. So do we need to go in and advance the timing because of that?
You know, I've lived with that whole theory my whole life. Ever when I was 17, people said, no, if you got methanol, you've got to add this much more timing. It needs more timing. It burns slower, all of those things.
Yeah.
Every time I've tested it, I've tried putting more timing in.
And?
My experience is it does not change. If this engine wants 40 degrees between the gasoline.
Wait. You're saying the old guy tale and the internet are wrong?
I'm saying my experience is that when I advanced the timing, and I did it on this combination too, I went and put 2 more degrees in it, and it just did nothing.
Well, you would see it if it did. I mean, you've been doing this a long time, Steve, and I take your word as pretty credible.
Gospel.
It's credible.
Yeah. So what you don't know is Steve actually pre-tuned all of this stuff off camera. And so what he's saying is that he actually did timing sweeps with it that were not shown in the episode, and you just found nothing. So we don't need to do that.
It liked what it liked. There are some, quote, gasolines that are fast burn fuels that will recommend that you take timing out because they're a quicker burning fuel and will cause detonation. But in these, between the methanol, the oxygenated, did not change anything, and even the 116, they all took the same timing.
Same timing. Interesting.
Wow.
Here's the other thing I guess I'll ask from your experience is that I also hear, methanol has a much bigger tuning window. So what does that mean, and is it true?
I'll say that Norm Grimes told me once that he could be within 10% of his tune-up and the car's ET did not change. And I take Norm Grimes' word pretty well since he's won a few championships. What my take on that is kind of when you're tuning something mechanically, since things like methanol use so much more fuel than gasoline, virtually twice as much, if we change something mechanically, like let's say a pill change, if we're in a pill range of 110 with gasoline, if we're looking at injected stuff mechanically, we would be in a pill range of maybe 160 with methanol. So when you change 5 thousandths, it's not going to make as big a difference.
As a percentage.
Percentage-wise when it's twice as much. Now, taking on the other side of that, when we're looking at newer EFI tuning that really relates to percentages a lot, when you say I want a 5% change, it's a 5% change, whether it's gasoline or methanol. But my experience still is that once you're kind of in that fat meat part of the methanol, it really doesn't care if it's at 11.5 or 12.2. The power is basically the same. So it's doesn't seem to be as sensitive as gasoline.
And I hear guys say that about E85 as well, especially when they're boost tuning. They're like, it's just safer.
Yeah. And I wonder if part of
Just
that
run
has to do with the cooling ability of methanol and E85. I mean, there's a few questions that I still have about it, but my experience is that they do have a wider window. You can be off a little bit on the rich side, and they still make the power.
Don't care. So. Okay.
What's the octane equivalent of methanol?
It's 110-ish.
110-ish, yeah.
Okay.
But then I think it's greater than that because it also has that cooling factor, which leads to detonation resistance. So I think that the effective, what you can do with it versus the octane rating is much higher than it would be with gasoline.
Yeah, the way that they test, fuels is sometimes different, whether it be gasoline or E85 and taking temperature into consideration and those things. So sometimes it's hard to get a specific quote octane number,
right?
With research and motor octane like in gasoline, but an effective ratio, like you say, it might be around 110, but with the cooling, it's way higher.
Well, and the other thing about the cooling with methanol is, well, first of all, it's just out of your mind fantastic for boost. Guys are getting rid of their intercoolers just running methanol. But the other thing is, even if you're running naturally aspirated, you will never overheat. You can almost run no cooling system if you're drag racing on methanol.
Perfect example is sprint cars forever and ever and ever with a radiator about this big and methanol. And when they'd start to get a little temperature in them, they'd take their dial-a-jet, click in a few and make it richer, pull the motor down and go back to racing when the green flag dropped.
Yeah. Let's go into pros and cons of methanol. I think it has some big cons, again, that is what stops me from considering it useful. The problem with methanol is you have to service the fuel system anytime you're going to park the car.
That's because of it's corrosive?
It's corrosive, it's hygroscopic, so it pulls water in and then corrodes everything. Here's a question, because I know that like on a top alcohol funny car, it just destroys the oil on every pass.
Yeah.
Does that happen if you're using it on a boat?
If you're making that kind of power, it does. I mean, but I think a lot of that has to do with when you're running 30 pounds of boost, you're pushing something past the rings no matter what.
Every single time.
So maybe with less boost or normally aspirated, you're not going to have those problems to that extreme.
The other thing is that it's harder to ignite. Have you run across a situation where you need more ignition system than you would for gasoline if you're running in methanol?
Not so much more ignition system, because it seems with the MSD stuff, we're kind of okay with most of all that stuff anyway. What I have seen, though, is it's a little harder to ignite, and so we have to run a higher engine temperature to get it to vaporize some, so it does ignite.
Yeah, you got to run higher engine temperature so it vaporizes. Yeah. How about if the ignition's got like 4 spark plugs completely knocked out of it?
Well, that slows things down just a bit. But see, then again, the MSD kept firing past.
And the pros for it, obviously, dirt cheap makes power. I guess the last thing I want to do is look at the fuel pounds per hour on all of these gasolines, because I think it's going to be mind-blowing how much fuel the methanol actually takes.
Okay, in pounds per hour, which one are we going to start with here?
This is a really good visual. Just so you know what you're looking at, black right here is Sunoco 116. Red is E85. Green is the oxygenated fuel, and way up here is the blue methanol. So this is how much fuel is being used. What this graphically shows you is how much energy is available in each gallon of each one of these fuels.
It really does.
There's actually less energy in a gallon or in a pound of methanol than there is in gasoline, which is why you have to burn twice as much of it to make power. And that's what that shows you.
Mm-hmm.
We've got a funny little spot down here where it crosses over, where you would typically think that these lines should be switched. But a lot of times what I see with the fuel turbines is a float just happens to open up momentarily at the beginning of a pull, so you'll see a little surge in fuel, and so I think that's all that is. I think from this area over, from about 5,000 up, is absolutely what we see typically, and had we done a different run, it might show something a little different there, but this is really what's happening.
A big takeaway for me also is how much more fuel you need if it's oxygenated than you do if it's regular.
It's a
More
lot.
power, more fuel.
Yeah, it's a lot. So let's conclude. We've looked at the power. Oxygenated fuel overall is the win. We've looked at the pros and cons. 116, basically the con is expense. The pro is that it's available and it works. Oxygenated, the huge pro was ultimate power.
Yeah.
And maybe it had problems where it won't pass tech in some classes. The E85, big pro is that it's cheap, it makes power, it's awesome for boost, it's available from the pump. The big con is that it eats up your fuel system.
Right.
Same thing with methanol. The con, it eats up your fuel system. The pro, it makes tons of power. So, which fuel?
Well, oxygenated gas for sure.
Me too. You?
Me too.
Wow. And I
The
didn't
first
see
time
that.
we've agreed.
I didn't see that when I was coming in on this test at all.
I didn't either. I was actually thinking methanol was going to be my choice, but for the regular guy,
Yeah.
I guess the oxygenated stuff is cool.
Absolutely, but I'll modify my statement that if I'm going to be running boost, that's absolutely going to change to E85 or methanol.
Yes, I agree.
So basically, I'd say if you're a guy on pump gas, don't worry about any of this. You might want to run E85. It'll give you a little bit more power on your naturally aspirated deal. If you've got compression, man, this oxygenated fuel is an eye-opener. That's going to give you another tenth or something, put you just over the edge of where you need to be. If you're running boost, just go to the alcohol. That's it, right?
Done.
Done. All right, firm answers, which rarely happens on any episode of
Engine Master.